couple weeks ago, I did a video about 5-star recruits who ended up at small schools, and you guys really liked that one. Today, I'm going to do somewhat of a part 2 and start a new series where I take a look at big-time recruits who also ended up at smaller schools. These aren't just guys who were 5 stars, but there are a ton of players who were supposed to be the next big thing at a big-time program who are now playing lower-level football. It's not a knock on them, but it's more so a video just spotlighting who these guys are and where they ended up. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about 8 big-time recruits who are now at small schools. Okay, so the first guy I want to talk about is a player by the name of Wesolak. He's one of those names that if you really follow college football recruiting you might know, but for the most part, you probably don't. He ended up becoming the number 166 player in the class of 2022 and the number 4 player in the state of Missouri. He came out of Boonville, Missouri, which is not too far away from Columbia, and after originally committing to the Clemson Tigers, DJ would end up signing with the Missouri Tigers. This was honestly a pretty big get for Mizzou, and there was a lot of momentum for Elijah Drinkwitz. He ended up finishing with 119 total tackles, 17 sacks, and a pair of fumbles during his career. He was offered by pretty much every school in the nation and would arrive at Mizzou with some hype. Unfortunately, DJ was not able to get anything going. After just 2 years in Columbia, he would transfer across the country. He'd end up at Oregon State for the 2024 season, and in total while he was there with the Beavers, he finished with 2 tackles. This was kind of unfortunate, so he made the jump one more time and came back home to the state of Missouri to play for the Missouri State Bears. If it was literally any other season in the history of the program, he would have been a 4-star recruit who went to the FCS level, but the Bears are now in their first season in the FBS. So far in his first game, DJ ended up finishing with 2 tackles, but for a guy who was at one point committed to Clemson and supposed to be the face of the Mizzou defensive line, ending up at Missouri State and having 4 tackles in 4 years is a little bit unfortunate. The last few years, North Carolina has been on a tear with the running back position as guys like Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Ty Chandler, and most recently Omarion Hampton ended up becoming stars while they were in Chapel Hill. George Pettaway was supposed to be the next one up. Pettaway was also part of the class of 2022, and he was the number 8 running back and the 99th player in the nation. He ended up going to Suffolk Academy, which is located in Virginia, and Pettaway had offers from nearly every school in the nation. Pettaway had been seen as somewhat of a prodigy for quite some time, and he would eventually become the Virginia Gatorade Player of the Year and finish with a grand total of 3,000 yards and 46 touchdowns, while also having 47 catches for 880 yards and 9 touchdowns. Pettaway would arrive at North Carolina, hoping to be the next big thing, but his first 2 years at North Carolina weren't all that great. He only finished with 20 carries for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns before eventually transferring back near closer to home, and he ended up with the James Madison Dukes. Pettaway became the highest rated player to ever play for James Madison, and in 2024, he finished with 980 yards and 5 touchdowns. So far this season in 2 games, Pettaway has 120 yards as well, and many think he's an NFL draft prospect for 2026 and could be a late round steal. Not all the players on this list are going to end up being bust or disappointment, but yeah, it's kind of cool that a top 100 player in the class of 2022 is now a starter for James Madison. For our third guy, we have a super well-known player, and that is quarterback Jaden Rashada. He's definitely one of the more interesting players in the last couple of years, as coming out of Pittsburgh High School in California, at one point Jaden was considered a 5-star recruit. He ended up finishing with 3,000 yards and 32 touchdowns as a senior, and ended up having NIL fallouts with both Miami and Florida before eventually flipping to where his dad played college football, Arizona State. Rashada was considered the number 6 quarterback and the 44th best player in the class of 2023, and he would arrive at Arizona State with a lot of hype. Unfortunately, Rashada was not able to get much going, as after throwing for just under 500 yards and 4 touchdowns and 3 picks, he'd end up getting hurt. For some reason, he decided to transfer to Georgia for the 2024 season, where he never saw the field and he never was going to. After entering the portal for the 2025 season, it took him quite some time, but he eventually found his new home at Sacramento State. They're a program trying to get themselves to the FBS and have a lot of money to spend, so Jaden became the poster child for them now. In his first game, Rashada went 11 of 27 for 100 yards and an interception. He only completed 40% of his passes, and so far he's not looking great. For a guy who was at one point a 5-star, it's kind of crazy that he's now at Sacramento State and also sort of struggling. For our next guy, I want to give a shout out to Canes8195 for recommending to talk about Cyrus Moss. He's a guy I did not know much about going into today's video, but coming out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, Cyrus was a big-time player. He ended up being ranked as the number 6 edge rusher in the nation, the number 1 player in the state of Nevada, and the 56th best player in the class of 2022. After not playing at all during the 2022 season, Moss would end up having 1 tackle in 2023 with the Miami Hurricanes. After that, he would decide to enter the 2024 transfer portal, where he would settle on Portland State. This was sort of a major fall-off for him, but he finished with 3 total tackles in the 2024 season. What's even sadder is after the 2024 season, he'd make an even more ridiculous transfer, as he's now at Minot State. The Beavers are a Division II program located in the state of North Dakota, and hopefully Moss can do well there. After going from a guy at Bishop Gorman in Miami to being in North Dakota playing Division II football, he has unfortunately had a bit of a fall off, but props to him for continuing to try. The 5th guy I want to talk about is Demorie Tate. He was a former 5-star recruit at one point, and he unfortunately really had a fall off. Going back in time, he went to Freedom High School, which was located in the city of Orlando, Florida, and Demorie Tate, according to 24/7 Sports at least, was the number 3 corner, the 22nd best player in the country, and a 5-star recruit. He was one of the first big recruits for Mike Norvell, but sadly, Tate was never really able to get going while he was there. He would end up never stepping foot on the field and recording a tackle. And after the 2022 season, Tate would decide to enter the transfer portal. He didn't end up landing anywhere, and actually would sit out his next college football season before eventually going down the street to Florida A&M. They were coming off a very successful season in which they went 12-1 and were HBCU national champions, but Tate was never really able to get going there either. I'm not sure if he even recorded a single stat, and sadly, he ended up being a bust. Demorie Tate was a 5-star recruit heading into Florida State, and ended up at a pretty low level of football, and didn't really get a chance to do much. Our next guy is a running back recruit by the name of Trevonte Citizen. You've probably heard about him as he was one of the more infamous names in the 2022 class, and he's also just a couple of spots below the other guy on the list in George Pettaway. Trevonte Citizen had a very interesting high school career, as well at Lake Charles Prep in Louisiana. He became a 4-star recruit and would originally commit to LSU. He ended up finishing with 615 yards and 8 touchdowns during the 2020 season, and then followed that up with nearly 800 yards and 11 touchdowns his senior season. He'd have one of the more interesting commitment videos as he faked out a couple of schools before signing with Miami, and LSU fans weren't too thrilled about that. According to 24/7 Sports, he was the number 9 running back and the 108th best player in the class of 2022, and he would arrive at Miami with a lot of fanfare. During his 2 seasons there, he got on the field a couple of times but never registered a single stat, and then he would transfer down to the FCS level. He ended up going to McNeese State, where his dad was actually in the Hall of Fame. His dad Tony was a star for them, so I guess it made sense why Trevonte ended up there. Last season, he ended up running for 107 yards as a backup, but this year in 2025, he already has 73 yards and a touchdown in his first game, so Citizen might have a larger role and might actually pan out there. I've now covered Caleb Burton III a couple of times on the channel, but he is definitely a really interesting story. Caleb Burton at one point was the number 10 player in the entire country, as coming out of the state of Texas, he was a stud at Lake Travis High School. At one point, Burton was the top receiver, as he had 82 catches for 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns during his first 2 seasons, but then he ended up having a knee injury that sort of messed up the back half of his high school career, but he still had 49 catches for nearly 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns as a senior. Burton would arrive at Ohio State and did not get on the field. He then would decide to transfer to Auburn ahead of the 2023 season, where he actually was decent. He had 16 catches for 226 yards, but then he fell behind on the depth chart in 2024, only having 2 catches for 49 yards. Burton would decide to enter the 2025 transfer portal, where he is now at UConn. He hasn't registered a stat for the Huskies yet, so I'm not sure if he's going to play much of a role, but for a guy who at one point was a top 10 recruit, to fall all the way to UConn is definitely interesting. And last but not least, we have another sad story, and that is going to be Walker Howard. He ended up going to St. Thomas More Catholic High School, and alongside wide receiver Jack Besh, who's now a rookie with the Raiders, Walker Howard blew up into a huge recruit. He threw for 3,400 yards and 42 touchdowns as a junior, and had 2,400 yards and 25 touchdowns as a senior. Because of that, Howard would become a borderline 5-star recruit, and just like his dad, who was an LSU quarterback back in the day, he would follow him there. According to 24/7 Sports, Howard was the number 5 quarterback and the 40th best player in the class of 2022. LSU was getting a guy they could build upon in the future, but sadly Howard never really played. He ended up completing 2 passes for 7 yards before he would transfer to Ole Miss. Jackson Dart was there both of those 2 seasons, and Howard was forced to hold the mop. He would complete 3 of 6 passes during his 2 years in Oxford for 56 yards and decided to transfer back home. He would go back to Louisiana, who needed a new starting quarterback, and he ended up winning the job. He went 10 of 22 for 88 yards and an interception before he ended up getting injured. It looks like he's going to have surgery and will be out the rest of the season, and this is definitely very tragic for Walker. For a guy who at one point I thought was going to be NFL out of LSU, he now has to wait 1 more year before he can even play again. So yeah, today we talked about 8 big-time recruits who are now at smaller schools, and most of them ended up being bust, but a couple of them still have some football ahead of them. But what do you guys think? I want to make a part 2. So who's a blue chip recruit who ended up at a group of 5 or an FCS school that I can put in my next one? What do you think of these guys? And before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.